We are tracking a very dynamic storm coming into Indiana. I'm 13 News meteorologist Matt Standridge. We have a weather impact alert because we're going to get these clusters of severe thunderstorms coming into the state really later this afternoon and evening. Now, for the start of your Friday, we've been tracking some severe storms in extreme far southern Indiana. In fact, our very own Chuck Lofton was all over the world, which is right here in southern Indiana, and he had multiple severe thunderstorm warnings. A lot of these have some hail in them. The atmosphere is just ready to go. Now, we are safe, at least in central Indiana, from these farther to the south. But as this cold front comes in and it taps into our heat and humidity that we built up the past several days, we're going to spark our own thunderstorms as well. But look at the system overall. We had a couple hailers in northern Indiana and even a couple tornadoes there in parts of Michigan. Wait to be confirmed, but we had a lot of damage that looks similar to what a tornado damage would be. So we'll have to see. But we had the warm front come on through, so now we're warm and humid. On the backside, we have these cold weather alerts. Look at this cold rain coming in across the Dakotas. So this front's pretty powerful. It's going to knock us back down to where we should be. We shouldn't be in the upper 80s. We should be in the mid 70s. That's where we're heading. So in the meantime, we got a couple thunderstorms in extreme far southern Indiana to track throughout the day, but closer to Indianapolis, we don't have to worry until about 4 o'clock. I think by about 4 o'clock, we'll start to watch some of these cells develop in Illinois. They'll be small at first, but they'll quickly grow. They could have their own supercell structure to them, a lot of lightning and some rotation. As they approach the Indiana state line, they'll get bigger and they may kind of start running into each other, forming more of these individual clusters where maybe it's a group of 2 or 3 storms together and all in one mass, and there's another one that has 2 or 3 storms in it in a mass too. And over time, as they push across the state, I think they'll get bigger and bigger. So we think that timeline is anywhere between 4 to 10 o'clock. That's the overall window. But if we had to pinpoint that, because that's still a 6-hour time window, if we had to narrow that down a bit, we would say the worst storms we think across central Indiana will be between 6 to 9 o'clock this evening. After 9 o'clock, most of the severe threats really should be pushing into Ohio. Can't rule out the chance for a few lingering showers, maybe even a stray downpour developing on the backside of the cold front. But I think those would be very isolated, and those probably wouldn't be too severe, but we'll have to watch. The main impacts, though, that we're tracking will be, of course, a lot of heavy rain and lightning, but the primary threat is hail. We could have some hailstones that are 2 inches or maybe even 2.5 inches. So that's about the same size as an egg like we get at the store, a hen egg, or a tennis ball. So that can do some damage pretty easily. That can go through a windshield. Winds up to 80 miles per hour. I think we're going to be in that spot between 60 to 80. Not every storm will have up to 80, but we had some storms yesterday in northern Indiana that got up to 80 miles per hour. So I think that could be very possible today in central Indiana. So a lot of wind, be the same as an EF0 tornado. But then speaking of tornadoes, those are definitely possible too. We think especially kind of near and south of I-70. So if we cut Indiana in half, it's the southern half that would have the highest potential. But if you guys remember back in early April when we had all those tornadoes across central Indiana, the main circulation actually wasn't a supercell thunderstorm. That's a rotating storm just by itself. It was actually a windstorm that was blowing so fast into Hendricks County there towards Avon on the north side in Brownsburg, formed a tornado, and that spinning motion just kept going for hours across the state. That could be something that we're watching, where the wind actually produces its own kind of circulation, its own tornado every once in a while. We think, though, most of the school day is fine. You know, we're getting to that time of year where maybe recess gets a little bit longer, maybe even have a second recess. Maybe there are field trips across the state. Great weather for all those. I think even by the time we're headed home, we're safe. Up until about 4 o'clock and 4:30, that's when Indiana's fine. We'll start seeing those storms get close to the state line and really get into Indiana by about 5 to 6. So I think for many of us heading home from school, we'll be fine. But for a lot of the older kids, you know, we got practices, we've got games. It's a big night. A lot of baseball, softball games, track meets, boys, golf, girls, tennis. There's a lot going on. Those could be impacted later into the evening. Until then, it's going to be warm and humid. One good thing is that the wind's going to be moving. We'll have some gusts out of the south up to about 20, 25 miles per hour. So at least the air's moving, but it's just feeding the atmosphere with more heat and humidity. So we'll get well into the 80s today. I wouldn't be surprised if we popped to 90 every once in a while here across central Indiana. But most of the rain chances are later this evening. Here's that 6 to 9 time window when we're really expecting the worst of the storms to arrive. So let's go through some of the severe threats. This is as of this morning. These may be slightly adjusted over time. Level 4 threat for kind of the southern third of the state. If you put it into thirds, There we have that level 4 threat up to 5. So 4 is kind of right there. We have a level 3 across central Indiana, and level 2 to the north, and level 1 once you get into Michigan. So a couple different things with these. Let's first talk about coverage of storms. In a level 1 and 2, getting more isolated storms. Level 3, more scattered storms. When we say scattered, that doesn't mean absolutely everyone gets a storm. And I'll show you future track and kind of show you what I mean by that. But they'll be kind of scattered and then more numerous storms. So the zones not only talk about how beefy the storms will be, but how widespread, how much coverage are we going to get? You know, does every single county in the red get one? There's a higher chance of that. Does every county in the yellow? Probably not. Level 3, hit or miss though. Not everyone gets one, but there'll be a lot of them. So we'll be watching some of these severe threats throughout the evening hours. Now let's talk more about the threats themselves. This kind of plays into what level that you have. Start with wind. There's gonna be a lot of wind with these storms. Whenever you have storms and temperatures in the 80s to near 90, they usually become very wind dominant. There's just so much heat energy to use, so they just kind of gust out as much as possible. So this dark blue color shows you wind gusts up to about 70 miles per hour, 80 miles per hour for kind of southern Indiana. Once you get towards Lake Monroe and there towards Bartholomew County into Bedford and Seymour, all the way south towards the Ohio River, up to 80. Now, doesn't mean every storm in this is going to be to that 80 mile per hour mark. However, that's the potential. A lot of gusty winds across central and southern Indiana. Then we get to hail. We are looking at a couple different things, different dry pockets in the air, because you don't want too much water. When you have too much water in the clouds, what will happen is you actually just kind of wet the stones and kind of try to melt them a little bit faster. So you want some dry air for these hailstones to get kind of bigger. But then you also want a lot of heat. So when we have so much heat, the stones themselves can get bigger because the atmosphere can hold heavier things. That's really all about it is. When by the time it reaches the ground, basically the atmosphere just can't hold it anymore. So what's going to happen here, it's really interesting. Up in the clouds, we're going to have hailstones the size of melons. I mean, they're going to be big, but because we're in the 80s, a lot of that melts off. And so what you're left with is this map. We think, you know, there's a good chance of the size of an egg. Now, I know it's kind of weird to hear just hen egg. We say that because we get a lot of questions. Well, what about an ostrich egg? What about, you know, all these kind of things. The eggs that you get at the grocery store, that's kind of what we're talking about, to 2 inch or so. 2.5 inches would be close to tennis ball sized hail. And I think that's possible for parts of central Indiana too. It's southern Indiana where we could have up to baseball sized hail. Then we get to tornado threats. There's a little bit of rotation in the atmosphere, especially for southern Indiana. That's where the threat is high, but we're kind of teetering between low and medium. I-70 kind of cuts right at the difference between low and medium very roughly. We think near I-70 and south of I-70 is where we have that tornado risk to be the highest. What about when the storms we're talking about? We've already talked about 4 or 5 o'clock, getting close to the state line. Well, here's another way to look at it. We think for our western counties, 5 to 7. 6 to 9 is a good guess for much of central Indiana, from South Bend going up and down US 31, and then kind of curve into the south, because what will happen is these storms will be slanted a little bit, kind of like this, and so they'll move this way. So I think parts of central Indiana, closer to I-70, they'll arrive faster than, let's say, southern Indiana. But anyways, this medium purple color, at 6 to 9, that includes Indianapolis, Carmel, Zionsville, Westfield, Noblesville, up to Kokomo, Peru, and Tipton, and down south towards Bedford. Seymour, we're starting to get to that 7 o'clock, and that will extend into Newcastle and Muncie, Rushville for that 7 to 10 o'clock time window. That's eastern Indiana, Richmond, Centerville, Hagerstown, Connorsville, and DeLiberty, and Jay County, Winchester. We're included in that 7 to 9 o'clock window. Here's a look at Future Track 13. It was a nice start this morning. We'll continue to have a lot of sun throughout the day. A couple clouds every once in a while, but still a lot of sun getting through to heat us up well into the 80s. We'll have to see how warm we get, especially with that south wind. But here's 4 o'clock. Start to watch these clusters of storms develop. They'll be kind of small at first. They can be potent though. Over time, they'll get bigger, and some of them will start to run into one another. Now, I think there still may be a few little breaks in between some of these clusters, and if you are able to kind of slide in there, you may just get some rain and some thunder, and you think, hey, it wasn't too bad. That is certainly possible, and you may not even get a severe thunderstorm warning. But where the storms are the most potent, that's where the warnings will be issued. It'll either be a severe thunderstorm warning for wind and hail, or it will be a tornado warning, which would mean there's rotation on it, but there could also be wind and hail with it as well. So we'll watch out for those. They'll generally go from west to east. Here's 6 o'clock. approaching the Indianapolis area, but more if you took the state and divided it into two, it's the western half right there at 6 o'clock. 7 o'clock coming in closer to Indianapolis. We're getting close to first pitch there for the Indianapolis Indians. We'll have to watch for some nasty storms coming on through from Kokomo south all the way to Columbus and Seymour. Greenwood and Shelbyville will be included on that as well. Then we start talking about eastern Indiana after from 7 o'clock and onward, 8, 9 o'clock or so. Now, we'll have to see how quickly it can leave, but I went ahead and put the window up to about 9 or 10. So I still think there could be some wiggle room on some of these timelines. And we may have to adjust by an hour or so on some of these. But essentially, you need to know it's the evening when those storms will come in. And at least you'll see them, because I don't think they'll necessarily pop up right over us. They'll do that popping in Illinois. And if you just look in that western sky, you'll see them. You'll probably see a shelf cloud. You'll see a lot of dark skies come in. Or you'll probably get first, well, you'll see some lightning off in the distance. Even though it's daytime, there'll be a lot of lightning. So I think you'll still see some of that lightning. Dark clouds will start to move in first. You'll get some rush of wind right over where you live. And then the heavy rain, possibly some hail. And for some of us, there could be some places where it starts to spin a little bit. So that's kind of walking you through what the storm would be like. After about 10, 11 o'clock, I think most of the severe threats are done for Indiana. But as cooler air starts moving in, there could be a stray shower or downpour across the state. Very hit or miss. Not everyone's going to get one of those. So let's talk about a few things that we have going on today and the timeline for them. So, big deal. Tippecanoe County, a lot of kids, a lot of families headed to West Lafayette to celebrate our graduates. We have Division 2, 3, and 4 commencements taking place today. You think, what are we talking? College of Agriculture, College of Engineering, and College of Pharmacy. I believe those are the ones throughout the day, but they have them all throughout the day. You know, some start at 9:30, some I believe start at 7. And so first half of the day looks great, even all the way up to 2 or 3 o'clock. But notice, because we are west of Indianapolis, you know, we're closer to the state line with Illinois than Ohio, we may get our storms earlier. So went ahead and put 4 o'clock to watch, but I really think it's 5 and 6 o'clock that we'll be watching those storms on the campus of Purdue. So keep that in mind headed to Tippecanoe County. It's Fast Friday. Guys, we are just about over a week away until the Indy 500. It's going to be another hot one at the track. At least we don't have to worry about rain for most of the day. For last day of practice before we get to the Armed Forces qualifying, we have that qualifying draw there in the evening. That's when we think the storms will start to approach the speedway. So keep in mind about that. Be ready to seek shelter, but much of the day it's going to be fine there at IMS. Have a great one out there. Then we get to the evening and first pitch for our Indianapolis Indians taking on the Louisville Bats. 7:05 for first pitch. We could be in the 80s with storms approaching. I think it's going to be a very stormy start as we're trying to head into Victory Field, and storms right over us, possibly right around first pitch or so, give or take 30 minutes. But there's a chance that we start really drying out by about 8:30. So I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do. They're probably not exactly sure what they want to do yet, but they're making their plans. We'll let you know throughout the evening how the Indians decide to play things out. Maybe you can just wait through the whole thing and then start later. We'll see. But that means they got to get out of here fast. I think for some of us, they will. There's a good chance you get a storm for a good, let's say, 2 hours or so, but some could even get it up to about 3 hours for some stormy weather. So if we can get that out of here, we start a nice weekend. Lots of sunshine for your Saturday and Sunday. Very pleasant weather. The humidity will be knocked out. We'll be right where we should be this time of year, mid-70s. And that's exactly where we'll be. Then we get into an interesting pattern next week. Low pressure moves in, but it's not too potent. I think it's going to produce a lot of extra clouds and very unsettled weather. Some scattered showers every once in a while, then a peak of sun, and then maybe a few rumbles of thunder, and then back to some showers, maybe a downpour. It's kind of that sort of weather. And as temperatures cool off into the 60s, that severe threat goes even farther down. So it shouldn't be too impactful other than some rain at times. So we'll have to watch there at IMS for some rain chances. And then we get approaching Carb Day, which is on Friday. If we can get all this out of here, we may have a few days of some nice weather. We'll have to see what the Indianapolis 500 looks like weather-wise. But if we can get the rain and kind of any activity to take place first, maybe we'll look a little bit better for the big day at the track at the big oval. So we'll have to watch. In the meantime, be on the lookout for some severe weather. Weather impact alert for your Friday. The whole storm window is 4 to 10. But we think the strongest storms will be between 6 and 9 o'clock. Make sure you stay here. Keep it local. We'll keep you advised.